Great advice. Thank you. Well, we can go ahead and get started. Let me
Can I
introduce
can I share
Dr.
my- can I share my slides?
Yeah. Let me pull it up. Um, Let me see. Yep. Dr. Marty is a professor at Florida State University and also the Associate Vice Provost for Academic Innovation. So, um, yeah, President Fosler, who used to work with us, his son Jonathan is a CIO at Florida State and introduced us to Dr. Marty and said, "This is the person you want to speak to you about AI." So, very looking forward to it. And if Jonathan likes him, then he's going to be very good. So, I'll turn that over to you, Dr. Marty, and let you go.
Wonderful. Well, I'm delighted to be here with you all. Again, I wasn't sure if I was speaking to a large group or a smaller group, and I'm going to go ahead with my remarks as I have planned. But I
Sure.
will try to. Feel free to interrupt at any time. I think is basically what I would say. I wasn't sure again if there were going to be 200 people in the room or 20 people in the room, right? But yes, as Jody said, I'm Paul Marty. I'm a professor in the School of Information here at Florida State University. I'm also the Associate Vice Provost for Academic Innovation. And I talked to a lot of people here about innovation in academia, AI in academia, technology, disruptive innovations, and how all of these systems are changing what we do. And I often like to start with a personal story. So I'm going to go ahead and do that here. So my father worked on the Plato project at the University of Illinois. So I can't see you all in the room, so I can't really ask for a show of hands, but I do have the chat open. Does anybody familiar with the Plato project?
No, I'm not.
No one in
No.
the room is familiar with it.
No in the room. Nobody on Zoom has said anything about it. No. If you aren't familiar with Plato, I highly recommend this book, The Friendly Orange Glow. So, developed in the 1960s, Plato was the world's first network computer system specifically designed for higher education. Um, Decades ahead of other computing systems at its time, Plato's technological advancements included touchscreen plasma displays with vector map graphics, integrated audio video systems, and groundbreaking applications such as electronic mail, instant messaging, and my personal favorite, massively multiplayer online role-playing games. I grew up with Plato. We moved to Illinois in 1972 when my dad, who had pioneered the development of language learning labs since the 1940s, was recruited by the University of Illinois to design and develop interactive language lessons for Plato. In 1974, we got a Plato 4 terminal, exactly like the one you see in the picture there in our house. And as a kid growing up in the 70s, every day I would sit at that terminal, bathed in the friendly orange glow of the Plato screen, and joyfully complete one Plato lesson after another. I learned French, I learned math, I learned genetics, I learned chemistry. I loved learning on Plato. I once told this story to a professor here at FSU's College of Education, and she took a long, hard look at me and said, "Well, that explains everything." But in all seriousness, right, the reason that Plato worked was that its goal was to support and encourage individual learning where students could use technology to learn at their own pace. And in developing this system, Plato laid the foundations for educational software, learning management systems, and today's cyber culture. And I tell you this story not to reminisce about early educational computing projects, but to remind us that we're actually good at this. We have a long, long history of universities dealing with disruptive technologies, and that history is so full that we've forgotten most of the educational technologies that moved us forward over the years. Technologies like Plato that, while forgotten, greatly influenced the way we think about learning today. And you'll hear people all around the country say that higher education isn't very good at adapting to disruptive technologies, but that isn't true at all. Now, I'll confess, we may not be fast at it. I mean, here at my university, it takes us 18 months to approve a syllabus, and that's, if all goes well. But you all may be faster. But we're steady and we're thoughtful, and we actually know what we're doing. And every time there is a new way to access, to manage, to create, to disseminate knowledge, universities rethink what they're doing and figure out a new way forward. And we've been doing that for literal centuries. Now, that's not easy to do. Coping with change is hard. Oftentimes, it's one step forward, one step back. Change is hard, change is scary, but change is also inevitable. So look at it this way. We're no longer in a world where universities look like this. right? We're no longer in a world where you go to the university to listen to the lecturer read to you, right? From the Latin word lectio, to read to you the only copy of the book that exists, the one book that you would like to read, but you can't because you can't find it anywhere. And probably even if you could, you probably couldn't read anyway. We haven't been in that world for a very long time. That's a 13th century medieval manuscript illustration from the British Library. There have been a lot of changes at universities since then. And now, of course, these changes haven't come easy. And one of the things that makes these changes so challenging is that the pace of technology change and the pace of technology adoption keeps increasing dramatically. So when we think about the past 800 years of history and how universities teach and research, all of the changes that universities have had to adapt to, chalkboards, and if you don't know the story of the great chalkboard rebellion that happened at Yale in the 1830s, you should definitely look up that story. Chalkboards, calculators, computers, online learning. We've always had more time to adapt to any of these technologies than we have now. Often these changes are generational, but today we don't have that luxury. Every new innovation is coming at us faster and faster. And as a result, we at universities have much less time to adapt with each one of those new innovations. And of course, generative AI is a fantastic example of that. So when ChatGPT emerged on the scene as a publicly available tool in November 2022, it took only 2 months for ChatGPT to reach 100 million users in this country, the fastest technology adoption we have ever seen. And it pretty much feels like universities have been reeling ever since. Now, the good news is that almost all of our universities have faculty somewhere on campus who've been researching and studying AI and machine learning. We've got experts in AI in multiple departments across campus: computer science, information science, data science, colleges of education. We have people who've been studying AI for a very, very long time. The bad news is that when all these generative AI tools, ChatGPT, Gemini, Copilot, Claude, you name it, when these tools brought access to AI from a relatively small set of academic researchers and scientists and gave it to literally everyone, when that happened, universities weren't sure how to respond. They were overwhelmed. They had trouble presenting a unified response. And from my perspective, that's really quite interesting. We had all the experience we needed. We had all the expertise we needed. Sorry, so about to say the word expertise. We had all the expertise we needed. We just couldn't access it. It was a bit like a dam bursting, right? We saw it coming. We weren't prepared. Why? Because adapting to emerging technologies has very little to do with technical expertise and everything to do with communication. And if we don't have a communication network in place that will allow us to respond effectively to disruptive innovations like generative AI, then we're not going to be able to figure out how to make a uniform response, either within our own institutions or across institutions nationally. So, with that in mind, the question that I've been asking everybody here at our university is, how can we use AI to leverage academic innovation? In other words, can we think about this as an opportunity? In many ways, the AI revolution has given us the chance to rethink the purpose and the roles of universities, to rethink how universities respond to radical change, how universities proactively adopt innovative ideas, and what really is the future of teaching and learning in higher education. And when we look at it from the lens of this question, that gives us the potential for a lot of really great conversations. And I'm sure you're having a lot of conversations where you are, and I know I've been having lots of conversations here at Florida State. So I wanted to spend a little time looking at what those conversations sound like, right? What are we saying? And I want to do that in three parts. So first, what do we tell our faculty and staff? Second, what are we talking about with our students? And third, what are we talking about with our administration? So part one. Oh, I can stop here at this point. Do anybody have any questions before I jump into these conversations? I know it's a kind of a small group. I feel like I'm talking to a large audience, but
Well, I do have one question, just
sure.
because you do have a historical aspect of technology. Do you think this is the most disruptive new technology, or was it the
Over over
internet? Or
over what period of time do we want to say? I mean, this is going to be very disruptive. It's already being very disruptive. Yes. I'm going to draw an internet analogy in just a minute.
Okay, and I don't mean just, and even disruptive may not be the right word. Like, just the way it changes everything. I know
Yeah.
disruption changes, but the way that the way like you're looking at, like you're going to talk about here, is the way looking at innovation, how it changes the way we think about education.
Absolutely. Transformational change. And again, we've gone through these changes, but they're happening faster and faster, and we have less time to adapt. And you can see why a lot of people are like, well, I can't deal with this. I'm not gonna move forward. But there are ways around that. So I'm gonna get to that in these conversations. But yes, I mean, this is very disruptive, and we have universities all across the country who don't know how they're going to handle this particular disruptive time period. Other questions? We'll get back to that in just a minute. Anything else? All right, let me go. Let me move forward then. Unless Jody, were you about to jump in?
No, we're good here. If anybody online has a question, I know they're
All right,
very
yeah, I got the chat
they're
open
very
here,
into it,
Ed.
so I know they'll ask questions.
Very good. I've got the chat open here. I don't see anything yet. All right, part one. What do we tell our faculty and staff? Well, and this connects to what Jody was saying a minute ago. The first thing that I tell our faculty is that we've been here before. Um, I've seen a lot of people arguing over the past couple of years that in many ways, this is like being back in the mid 1990s. So I think I can say this with this group. Think for a moment about where you were in 1993. I occasionally say that to groups of undergraduate students here at Florida State, and they all stare at me because, of course, none of them were alive in 1993. But think for a moment where you were in 1993. The internet, which for the past 30 years have been the province of scientists, researchers, a few hobbyists, right? Those of us that were on Usenet in the 80s, right? Suddenly becomes easily available to everyone with with the introduction of the World Wide Web and graphical web browsers in 93, right? World Wide Web comes out in April 93. NCSA Mosaic, the world's first graphical web browser, comes out in September 1993. And I'd argue that Mosaic, well, let me put it this way. I'd argue that the release of ChatGPT to the general public in November of 2022 precisely parallels the release of Mosaic to the general public in September 1993, in that it took what was previously available only to a few dedicated scientists and made it available to everyone. So when you look at it through that lens, if you, in terms of where we are now, when we talk about AI in higher education, we're 3 years into this. We're 3 years past 1993. This is 1996. There's no Google. There's no Netflix. There's no Facebook. Amazon is being run out of Jeff Bezos' garage. And Microsoft's Internet Explorer is in a knockdown, drag out fight with Netscape Navigator. And our students don't remember that time, but a lot of our faculty do. And yes, it was scary, and yes, it was disruptive, but you know what else was going on? Universities all across the country were taking advantage of these new technologies and figuring out ways to move higher education online, offering online classes, offering fully online degree programs. In fact, Florida State University's master's degree in library and information science went fully online, 100% online, over the World Wide Web in 1996, tied with Illinois and Syracuse for the very first fully online LIS programs in the world. And I like to remind faculty about this when I talk with them about AI. Because the fact is that we've done this before and we can do it again. And what we know from the history of technology is that the first thing we have to do is to empower our faculty and staff so they can make the best decisions for their own academic practices. And I argue that we do that in two ways. The first thing we need to do is to engage our faculty and staff as active participants in the process of adopting new technologies so that they can evaluate and assess these innovations for themselves so they can see what works best in their classroom and for their research. The more our faculty and staff understand the potentials of AI, the positive, the negative, the more they're able to play a leadership role in setting the agenda for AI on campus. So what we're doing here at Florida State University, we've taken a very clear philosophy and tried to make it as clear as we possibly can to our faculty that academic innovation here at Florida State University is faculty led from the ground up with strategic guidance and support from the Office of the Provost. Faculty governance is a core tenet of the university system, and faculty get to decide what happens with AI in their classroom, full stop. When you look at why faculty are so skeptical of emerging technologies, one of the reasons you see is that they often feel like they're left out of ed tech decisions, right? If the president says, hey, we purchased this new software and you're going to use it, or the CIO says, hey, we purchased this new software and you're going to see it, faculty are immediately going to push back. But if we give the faculty the chance to evaluate and make decisions on their own, they're much more likely to be receptive. The more we involve them in the decisions, the more we value their input, the better off we're all going to be. So, for example, we're a Microsoft campus here. And a year ago, we spent a lot of time with a bunch of faculty experimenting with Copilot Studio. Now, I don't know if you all are familiar with Copilot Studio over there. So, Copilot Studio is, so Microsoft confused everything by calling everything Copilot. Jody, are you all Microsoft campus or what?
We're a Google campus,
Okay, great. We're going to get to
but we
Google in
have
just a minute.
we have access to Microsoft tools as well. We do either way. So
All right, great. So yes, we're Microsoft campus here, Copilot everywhere. And in fact, our CIO, Jonathan Fozzard, he rolled out Copilot to every single faculty, staff, and student on campus right away in 2023. Everybody had access to, and now that's the base version of Copilot for the web. But one of the things that we had was we wanted the ability of our faculty to experiment with building their own custom GPTs for use in the classroom. And Microsoft's way of doing that is a tool called Copilot Studio, which allows you to essentially build your own agents. It's not really agentic AI; it's more like a custom GPT. But we experimented with this. We offered it up to the faculty. We said anybody who wants to try it out, give it a try. And we had a bunch of faculty from across campus take us up on this and try it out in the classroom. We held workshops. We worked with the faculty to basically create a custom GPT, give it access to your course syllabus, give it access to your readings, see if it can serve as I don't like the phrase virtual TA because it frightens the non-virtual TAs, but work as an interactive learning assistant in your classes. We figured out how to embed these custom GPTs directly into the Canvas LLM. In fact, Microsoft said that we were the first university to figure out how to put a Copilot agent into Canvas in the fall of 2024. It really wasn't all that hard. But we rolled this out and, the faculty spent a lot of time playing with it. The students spent a lot of time playing with it. And we pretty much decided it really wasn't all that helpful in the end. Which is I've got a whole talk about Copilot Studio that I don't have time to get into here, but it's interesting to see what worked and what didn't and what we got out of it. The important thing for this talk is that we gave the faculty the chance to get involved. We didn't force it on anybody, and the faculty had the chance to honestly assess the technology and decide for themselves whether or not this was something that they wanted to move forward with. I did this with my class. This is the Copilot that I built for my graduate course. I teach on museum informatics. Most of my academic research looks at information systems and technologies in museums. And I trained this entire custom GPT on my entire class and turned it loose for my students to see how effective it could be at answering their questions. And it wasn't quite as effective as I would have liked. It was also a tremendous amount of work. And I wasn't sure that the ROI was necessarily worth it. But it was incredibly valuable to experiment with these technologies. I think one of the things that we know when we're encouraging faculty to experiment with educational technology is that every new project may not necessarily succeed, but if you build that innovation mindset, that culture of innovation where faculty are up to experimenting, then that prepares them for the next technology coming down the pipeline, so they're more willing to jump on board with that. The other thing we have to do is we have to make sure that our faculty have the necessary resources so that they can make informed decisions about the technologies that they want to adapt or adopt. This isn't easy, right? There's a lot of tools out there. We are now also a Google campus. We had our CIO, Jonathan, arranged for Google to come here in the fall. We had a great Google Day on campus. We had a wonderful turnout among our faculty, staff, and students to learn about all the Google's AI tools. And one of the tools that we've had a number of faculty and, of course, a lot of our students picking up is Notebook LM. Are you all using Notebook LM where you are?
yes, we have access to that.
Do you have a lot of faculty experimenting with it in their classes?
We have some that have started experimenting with it on the quizzes that are built into it and note cards and that kind of stuff. Yeah.
And what we hear from our students is that they love this as a educational tool. So when I'm talking to our faculty, what I try to make very clear is that if we look at a broad spectrum, right? So Way over here on one side, we have students copying and pasting text from ChatGPT and claiming that they wrote it, right? We don't want that. That's way over here on this side. But way over here on the other side, we have students taking advantage of AI tools like Notebook LM to create study guides, practice quizzes, flashcards, this sort of stuff to help them learn better. Much in the same way that our university libraries have been installing AI tools into all of our online databases to help people search for information better. And helping people understand that spectrum and the responsible and ethical use of AI and where it falls on that spectrum is so incredibly important. What I've been doing with Notebook LM in my classes, and this is an example from a notebook that I created for my students in my class this semester, is I've created a separate notebook for each assignment. So in this particular example, this is the students are using a content management system called Mecca, which is developed by the Center for History and New Media at George Mason University. And what I did is I created a notebook and I put in a bunch of resources that would be useful to the students as guides as they worked on this Omeka project. Basically, they're building a database together online. All of those sources I vetted, I curated. I know they're all high quality sources. They're going to give the students good answers. Any questions the students had as they worked on the assignment, they could ask this notebook. So I created the notebook. I added all the sources. I made sure the sources were high quality. Then I shared the notebook with my students, and then they could then ask questions of the notebook. And I could also create things like audio guides and video guides, overviews, and all of these things for the students as well. And the students have loved this. This is an incredibly useful source. Unlike what we did with Microsoft Copilot, which turned out to be not all that helpful, like trying to have a know-it-all TA that was living in your class, it didn't in the end work out as well. This very targeted, very here's a bunch of sources was incredibly valuable because what the students found is if they were stuck on something and wondering how to solve a particular problem with this software, they could do a random Google search online. They wouldn't get a very good answer. If they did a search of the notebook, they got a very clear answer that was, of course, cited directly to whichever source or sources that the notebook took that information. And that's one of the wonderful things about Notebook LM, that any question you ask is directly cited. So you don't have those hallucinations and you can point to the faculty and the students that this is where the information is coming from, right? So we're using tools like this to make sure that our faculty not only have access to the latest AI tools, but understand their potential. Right? So they can be empowered to decide for themselves what technologies they want to use in the classroom, and the more we engage our faculty on the use of these tools, the more they can provide feedback that will inform what we do in the future with these tools moving forward. And that's not easy, right? And not every faculty member is going to want to experiment with these kinds of tools in the classroom. But what I keep reminding our faculty is that, okay, if you don't want to experiment, that's fine, right? Nobody's forcing you to do anything. But if you wait until someone else has already worked out all the bugs for you, then you basically abdicated any chance you might have to help shape that future. You're going to let somebody else make those decisions. So we're trying to provide the faculty with those opportunities. All right, that's what I was going to say about faculty. I'm going to move the students next. Any questions about faculty before I move the students?
No, I think they're all good here. Anybody online have questions for him?
Not yet. All right.
I think we're good.
Great. I'm going to keep going. What do we tell our students? So, the first thing we tell our students is that universities are no longer places where you go to acquire information, and they've not been that in it for a very, very long time, right? Go back to the picture I showed you earlier from 800 years ago. Knowledge is not the rare commodity that once was. And in fact, knowledge is increasingly available to everybody with an internet connection. And in that world, what's the role and purpose of universities? And we've all heard people ask now for many, many years, right? Why go to university if you can learn all the same things on YouTube for free? And my answer to that question, I'm sure we all have our own answers to that questions, but my answer to that question is that higher education is not about learning things. It's about learning how to apply the things that you learn, how to define a problem and develop solutions to those problems and test those solutions to be sure that those solutions are actually doing what needs to be done for the person who has that problem. And in a world where access to AI is ubiquitous, a world where everyone's going to have access to the same knowledge sets, where AI can give you the answers to the questions you ask, what's going to set humans apart from AI? Well, what's going to do that is how humans mediate those answers for other people to solve problems and make the world a better place. I hesitated here because I just had a story pop into my head that I'm not sure if I should tell it or not because it's not my story, but I'll tell it very quickly because I think it provides a wonderful example of this. I was at a lecture a few months ago and a guy was talking about um, his father, who was an oncologist who recently retired. And at the retirement party, a bunch of his patients came and talked about what a great doctor he was. And again, this isn't my story. This is someone else's story. So apologize if I got the story parts of the story wrong. But one of the patients came up and said that when she was diagnosed with breast cancer, she went and she talked to 5 different doctors. They all ran exactly the same tests. They all came up with exactly the same data. They all prescribed the exact same treatment plans. They all predicted the same prognosis, the same diagnosis, the same everything. There was no difference between any of the 5 doctors in terms of what they were going to do to treat her breast cancer. So, how did she decide which doctor to go with? Why did she pick this guy's father? It was because of his humanity, because of his bedside manner, because he was the person that she wanted to go through the treatment with. And I've actually repeated that story to some of our undergraduate students because I think it's a wonderful example of the world in which we are going, right? There was a time for years, I ran our undergraduate information technology program. And there was a time where you could be a student in IT and not necessarily worry about your people skills because your technical skills may have been rather unique. Maybe you knew how to do something that other people didn't know how to do. Well, that's less and less the case these days, right? In a world where knowledge is available to everybody, what you know is much less important than how you know it, how you can apply it, and how you can share that with somebody else. And in that world, our students' most important skills are going to be their people skills, their communication skills, their empathy, their humanity, their ability to help and inspire others. Those are the skills that our students need to be cultivating. So, as I mentioned, I talk to our undergraduate IT students here all the time. And it's so funny. You can imagine over the years, students will keep coming up to me. They'll say, Dr. Marty, what's the latest programming language I need to learn? What's the latest database system I need to learn? I'm like, none of that matters. Whatever you learn now is going to be outdated within a year. And in fact, almost all of those tech skills can be outsourced to someone else who's going to do it significantly cheaper than you ever would. And now it's going to be outsourced to AI. What you need to do instead is not focus on those specific tech skills. Why spend your time on the tech skills that can be outdated in 2 years? And instead, focus on your leadership skills, your communication skills, your management skills. That can be very hard for our students to grasp. But we need to help them understand that education is about lifelong learning and building those human-to-human connections. And in fact, thanks to AI, we now have the opportunity to raise the bar in our classrooms. We can move away from assignments that AI can do well and move toward assignments that are uniquely human. For example, we teach a course. I do a lot of work here in our innovation center, our innovation hub, right in the middle of campus. We have a course we teach there on design thinking. Incredibly popular course for students all around campus. Students from all majors take it. We run about 300 students through it a semester. They love that course because it's all hands-on, empathizing with users, figuring out what their problems are, designing solutions, iterating solutions, testing solutions, right? Classes like that allow us to move away from assignments that are merely checking boxes for compliance to offering more engaging, more meaningful learning experiences. And yes, that's going to mean changing a lot of our assignments, overhauling our courses, our curricula. That's going to require a lot of support and a lot of assistance, and it's not going to be easy. But if we want our students to have careers, if we want our students to succeed, they have to be able to answer what's your value add, right? What can you do that AI cannot? And if you don't have an answer to that question, I tell this to our students all the time. If you can't beat the AI, you're not going to have a career. We had to stop asking what AI can do and instead ask what AI can't do and do that instead. Another thing I tell our students, nobody's going to pay you to copy and paste from ChatGPT, right? That's not a job. And instead, we have to make sure that our students have the skills that they need to use AI effectively and ethically to solve problems, or else they're going to be left behind. I'd like to see a future of higher education where we create an environment where the students have the confidence to learn on their own, where they can creatively explore innovative solutions to complex challenges. And this is going to mean rethinking our curricula to focus on giving our students an innovation mindset where they work in interdisciplinary teams, use all the technologies at their disposal to define problems and propose solutions to those problems. A future where learning how to learn is more important than learning things. Because in my view, that's the only way our students are going to end up on the right side of the AI divide. And Jody, you asked about how disruptive this is going to be. The AI divide is going to be so much worse than the digital divide, it's not going to be funny at all. And our students who are left behind on the wrong side of the AI divide are not going to have a career. So to survive that future, we need to produce students from our universities that love learning and are good at explaining what they've learned to others in a way that emphasizes their humanity and those human-to-human connections, because when push comes to shove, it's our humanity that's going to carry the day and encourage our students to reach for new heights. All right, that's my spiel on students. I'm about to move to the administration, but I'm happy to jump with the questions about students if anybody who has any immediately. And obviously we have time for questions at the end too.
Let's keep going. This is good.
All right, admin. What do we tell our administration? This is a tricky one, right? I spent a lot of time talking to administration. Not easy. So what we tell our admin is that innovation thrives at the liminal edges between disciplines, right? And we need to create a culture of innovation that transcends those disciplinary boundaries. I'm sure you all know this about universities, but we are deeply rooted in our silos. So much so that the chemistry professor, for example, who comes up with an amazing innovation in the classroom, is much, much more likely to share that innovation with their chemistry colleagues at other universities around the world than they ever would be to share that innovation with, say, a professor of English or a professor of law at their same university. Because they have very straightforward structures in which to share than the former, and there's almost no format in which they can share the latter. And that's a challenge, because one of the nice things about being at a large research university is that we almost always have the expertise we need to respond to new technologies and new innovations in place somewhere. Faculty leadership is already an essential part of our institutional culture, but that expertise is distributed. Faculty tend to be isolated from each other, and we don't have, most universities do not have an effective network to bring that expertise together in a way that allows the institution to make informed decisions about how to best to move forward. One of the things we've really been wrestling with here is how do we support the catalysts that can spark innovation? Because in order to bridge those gaps and make those connections, we almost always need a catalyst, someone or something that's going to spark that reaction. And almost always, that's a faculty member, somebody who's already overworked and underpaid, who says, hey, I'm going to bring these people together and we're going to try to solve this problem. And we need to figure out how we can support the people who are doing that to bring those groups together. I hear this from faculty all the time. They're constantly saying, "Oh, I didn't know you were interested in that. We should do something together. We should work on this. How do we support the people that are trying to bridge those disciplinary boundaries?" Because that's a role that upper admin can play through a strategic investment of resources and personnel to provide guidance for faculty-driven innovation. Because we need upper admin to steer the campus in a strategic direction in a way that breaks down the silos that divide us and gives us better way to share the expertise we know we have across our departments and our disciplines more effectively. So what we're doing here at FSU is we're building an innovation ecosystem with an infrastructure that can help prepare us to cope with new emerging technologies. So for example, we have a brand new faculty innovators program that's growing strong. We have faculty from departments all across campus to get together every week in FSU's Innovation Hub. That's a picture of our Innovation Hub right there. To discuss all the ways that new innovations, like artificial intelligence, are transforming academia. And this is really interesting challenge, because the first step really in building this ecosystem is understanding that we're better at innovating within our disciplines than we are across our disciplines. And as I said, when all of our academic structures are based around sharing within disciplines and not within our institutions, then if we're going to move forward, we have to figure out the answers to very difficult questions. How do we break down those silos that divide us? How do we build interdisciplinary connections that cross those barriers? How do we share information more effectively across departments? And how do we support our innovative faculty and staff who are working as catalysts to solve these problems and forge these new connections? Every time we do one of these weekly sessions, I find I'm asking more and more questions about how do we support that particular work. We had a session just last week about we have a research computing center, high performance computing center here on campus, and they came and spoke to a large group of faculty on campus about the high performance computing resources that are available to them. Most of the faculty had no idea we had a high performance computing center on campus, right? They also had no idea how they might use high performance computing in their research. Right? So our first step is faculty, often faculty don't know that there are tools out there that could help them in their research. If they know they need a particular tool, they might not know where to go to find it. And conversely, on the flip side, we have faculty who are on their own initiative coming up with our own solutions to problems that if we knew that was going on, the university might be able to support that more effectively. So again, it's a problem of communication. And how do we share that expertise across these boundaries? So to summarize, three takeaways, right? When we talk about leveraging AI for academic innovation, we're really talking about three things. So first, we're talking about how do we empower our faculty and staff to be actively engaged in the evaluation and adoption of disruptive technologies so that they can make the right decisions for themselves and lead the way in bringing new tech into their teaching and research. Two, how do we prepare students for a future where access to knowledge is going to be increasingly ubiquitous so that they can be on the correct side of the AI divide? Because believe me, you don't want them to be on the wrong side of the AI divide. And three, how do we enable our administrators to remove the boundaries that are standing in the way of interdisciplinary innovation, collaboration, so that we can all find better ways to share across our departments and disciplines to take advantage of the expertise that universities are lucky to have? Or if you want that in one sentence, and this is what I'm saying all the time here at Florida State University, right? Our goal is to empower faculty, staff, and students to proactively adopt disruptive innovations, respond effectively to radical change, and shape the future of teaching and learning. And why are we doing this? Because that's how we prepare our institutions to not just deal with AI, but with any number of future innovations that have the potential to reshape higher education and reshape our universities. The steps that we're taking to empower our faculty, staff, and students and our administration to deal with AI today, those steps really aren't about AI qua AI. They're about leveraging AI to build a culture of innovation, to inculcate an innovation mindset where we end up better prepared to handle disruptive technologies writ large. And that's why all of these conversations that we're having, and why I'm so happy to be talking with you today, why all these conversations are so important. Because these are conversations about the future of academia that gets at how universities should respond, not just to artificial intelligence, but to all disruptive innovations, because there are a lot of things coming down the pipeline that we're going to have to worry about. If, for example, you haven't taken a look at the AR glasses that are right there on the horizon, you should take a look at them. We don't know how we're going to prepare for that future. I've been in a lot of conversations with universities. A lot of us were just at APLU having conversations there. Universities are facing disruptive technologies. We need a lot of guidance and a lot of support about how we're going to prepare for that. And if we're going to do that right, I think our ability to cope with change, to adapt to technology, to change the fabric of our institution, that needs to be part of the core culture of universities. Because if we can do this for AI, then we can do this for anything. And I'll stop there. Thank you so much. And happy to entertain questions.
Very good, thank you. What questions do you guys have for Dr. Marty? Anybody here in person or any online?
Uh, Thank you, Danielle. I appreciate the kind comments in the chat.
Hi,
I mean,
thank
not
you
so much.
for coming to meet with us today. I figured I'd turn on my camera since you're online here.
It's good to see you. How are you?
Doing well. If there was just a very beginning thing that you would want students to learn about AI in the field of business, what would
Hmm.
you suggest? And what tools do you think are important to integrate into that field?
So I've had a lot of conversations with our business school faculty here, and there's an associate dean over there in the College of Business that's a good friend of mine, and I spent a lot of time talking with him about that. He regularly brings in representatives from Microsoft to talk to the students about, for example, how they're integrating Copilot into everything, right? I mean, from the sense I have from listening to the Microsoft reps talk, there's nobody out there in the business world writing their own emails anymore, right? I mean, generative AI is creating all the emails for you. Your job in the business world is basically shepherding Copilot rather than doing a lot of writing yourself. And the demos that they're doing, basically, you can have the AI go and get all the information that you need to make this particular pitch, write this particular proposal. All you're doing is editing at the end. Um,
How do we delineate that, the ethics or the human aspect of that? Because again, that it's efficient, but is it
Yep.
effective?
Yep.
You know,
And that's the question that I think we all have, right? I asked that question to somebody once, and the answer that I got was, well, what universities call cheating, business calls progress. And I think that's a very interesting way to look at it. But my argument is that what's going to matter in all of this is our humanity. Because if all we're doing is sending AI written emails back and forth to each other, we've lost really a human touch to this. And I think it's important for our business school students to understand that human touch is going to set them apart. Um, I think the flip side of this is that once we reach a point where business A is sending AI written emails to business B, which is sending AI written emails back to business A, well, we're quickly going to realize that nobody needs to be sending those emails at all. We can just let the computers talk to each other, and then the humans are completely out of the equation. Um, and I think that's really more of the danger than anything else. People often ask me if I'm worried about students cheating with AI, and I say I've got 100 worries about AI, and cheating's not in the top 100. I worry about the collapse of American democracy, and I worry about the collapse of the loss of human agency. Um, and it's going to have to work very hard to preserve that.
and another flip side to that, and then I'll let somebody else ask a question, is, I see on social media, I don't know that we're not experiencing this here, but you see a lot of that I'm aware of, a lot of the faculty that, students are videotaping their faculty losing their minds about AI. And I don't know what I loved your comment. I guess this is more of a reflection than a question, but I loved your comment about helping students understand that what they can bring to AI instead of thinking about what AI brings to them. So thank you for that. That
Oh,
was really
you're
well said.
welcome. I appreciate that, and I think our students are receptive to that. Again, I think one of the things that we're finding when we talk to students about their let's put this another way, right? So we all know that you know, we all have lots of those. Or I don't know, maybe you don't, but we have a number of gen ed classes here that have 1,000 students in them, and they're asynchronous online, and the students read a book chapter from the book, and they take an online quiz, and all the answers are already available on Quizlet, right? It's not like anybody's really, you know what I mean? And in those classes, you can hardly blame the students from cheating one way or another. And when you talk to the students about those classes, they don't see them as really valuable educational experiences. On the flip side, if I ask the students, what are your most valuable classes? Those are the classes that they're hands-on, actually involved in learning things that they're going to use either in the job or in the career, or you name it, right? But where they see the value. And that's what I think is really the positive thing about moving forward in the future, is that, well, at least with our students here, when they see the value of learning, they want to do the learning themselves. And the only time they're cheating, quote unquote cheating, is when they don't see the value of what they're learning. And so there's a path forward in there somewhere.
Yes, thank you. I
Thank
appreciate it.
you.
Great presentation.
Thank you. Appreciate it. What else we got?
Yeah, we have a question here from
Hopefully you can hear me.
Scott Hahn. He handles our course development and course there's a title about course design and stuff like that.
Okay, kind of hear you, Scott. Go ahead.
Okay. Do you guys, have any of your instructors, I know you probably have a pretty good international population. Do you have any instructors that have been using AI translators for anything? I know Canvas has some built-in stuff that is available, like you can do a discussion and you can click a button and translate it into another language. Have you guys run into any of that or used any of that? And what?
I have not used any of that, but that's a great question. I'm going to ask some of our language faculty if they now. I mean, the language faculty have their own issues with AI translators in terms of when they're trying to teach students a language. But maybe we set that aside and just look at yeah, there's real potential there. I don't know if anybody's. I haven't tried them out yet. The new Apple AirPods that'll do the simultaneous translation for you in your ear. The ability to translate to break down those international barriers is huge, and I think a lot of the international faculty, I wouldn't be surprised if they're using these AI tools to translate for them. I don't know of any specific example off the top of my head though of that.
Joey, I have a question.
Yeah, we have one from Jen Randall, who is a vice president for enrollment.
Great.
So as an administrator, and this, I guess this could apply to any industry, not just higher education, But as an administrator with a lot of staff that was brought up during the COVID generation who only know the digital age, how do you go about, you'd mentioned talking about preserving the humanity. How do you even go about implementing that in a world of new workers who weren't in the classroom necessarily? They finished everything online. Are there any tactile tools or suggestions you have for how we roll that out to staff?
Well, I mean, that's an interesting question, right? Because again, it goes back to what do our students actually want? So when I go and I walk into our innovation hub here in the center of campus almost every day, and I talk to the students who are in there, and they're in there working on interdisciplinary projects, most of them co-curricular, unrelated to their coursework. They've got passion projects they're working on. What gets them really excited is working together in person, in teams to solve problems, right? And I think the students themselves have already pushed back against that completely online COVID world. Uh, I think what makes it difficult is that there's always going to be some students that are, more than happy to take the fully online asynchronous classes because that's an easy A because you can just look up the answers to all the questions on the internet, right? But the students who want an actual educational experience, that's not what they want. And so I kind of feel like the students the students who went through that time period are already, at least the ones I'm seeing, have already pushed back against it. Are you seeing the opposite? Are you seeing that they want to stay isolated?
To your point, I think non-traditional students that I work with every day, I mean, you do have both types. You've got people who are just trying to get the degree knocked out. They could care less about the interaction part of things. But I agree, there is a component to that with students and staff who want that interaction. My question more pertains to our staff members at the university who were brought up
Oh,
in generation
sorry. I missed
and
that.
the lack, how humanity can sometimes elude them because they've been brought up in the digital.
Well, I mean, I guess. Okay, so I mean I've spent a lot of time online and I've been around adjacent to people who study online communities for decades now. There's tons of research showing that you can have really great human connections in an online community. And my younger son was in middle school when COVID happened, and I swear Minecraft held that entire middle school class together. Right? And it wasn't any less social because they were mediating that through a Minecraft server. So I think there are ways of building those human connections through the technology. And after all, we see the sort of communities that people have built online and the strong connections they make there. So I'm surprised to hear that you've got staff that don't want to build. Do they just not want to have interactions with other people at all?
I mean, we do have some of
We
them.
do have some staff that would just prefer to be separate altogether. They don't they I'm not saying value the human connection. That may not be the right word, but they would just prefer not to have that human connection.
That's interesting. Again, away from staff back to students again, but this may be a relevant metaphor. I have a talk that I give to our undergraduate students called "The classes you are taking are the least important thing you are doing here." And it's a talk I like to give because so many of our students come from a background where the only thing that mattered was their academic performance. And I try to remind them that if you go to a university and all you do is take classes, you've missed 90% of the opportunities you have to grow as a person. And sometimes it takes somebody saying that to them for them to realize that there's a lot going on here outside the classes. And I always stress to them, I'm not telling you should blow off your classes. You should work hard and try to get A's in your classes. But if all you do is go to class, you missed most of the university experience. And I kind of feel like saying the same thing to the staff members, right? If all you're there is just I don't know if you're not there to help. We have a wonderful luxury working at the universities to build the next generation, right? Um, uh, I'm sure you've all heard the arguments about students as consumers, and my counter to that is always, no, the students are our products, right? The people that we are graduating are the next generation of this country, and we are in an unbelievably fortunate state to be able to shape that generation and guide what the future of our country is going to be. And I think all of our faculty and staff, see, or well, not well, let me rephrase that. I would hope that all our faculty and staff see the importance of that task that's in front of us. I feel like I'm not getting at your question, and I apologize for that.
Well, that's okay. I think it is actually.
Okay.
I think it's a cultural shift, that if we do have employees that are siloed, it's something we can work towards.
Yeah.
Other questions? One question I had, I know there's not an answer for this, but I'm just value your opinion. How quick do you see AI embedding itself in society? I mean, we're seeing it now on the larger scale companies that can invest money into it. The smaller companies are going to be slower to react to it because they don't have the infrastructure to handle it. But in Oklahoma City, for example, we saw Paycom, which is a big HR software company, lay off 500 employees, replace them with AI.
Hmm.
Um, Being a small Christian school, we see a lot of every year small schools close down, and so we've got to be nimble and react to this. But my hunch is we don't have much time, and everybody in higher ed for that matter. I just wonder how quick the society is going to start embedding this and start using it and things like that. I mean, I see what you're talking about with the email. I see emails all the time. I'm like, that's AI generated. I can tell you. Anytime there's emojis in an email, I know it's AI spit it out. Um, but how quick are we going to see the smaller companies start using this and things like that, where we've got to get the students on the right side, like you
I
know,
mean, everybody's already using it, right? I mean,
yeah.
if you're a Microsoft Office shop, you've got Copilot in there crafting your emails, writing your Word documents, doing your PowerPoint presentations for you. They're not very good. I often have our students, generate a PowerPoint presentation in Copilot just so they can see how bad it is, right? But it's already there, right? It's already everywhere. And what we're already seeing is people saying, as you said, Jody, I don't need to hire as many employers because as many employees because the employees I do have can use AI to help them complete their tasks. Our computer science departments are terribly worried because we see that very few junior developers are being hired now because the senior developers don't need to hire the junior developers because AI can do the work of the junior developer. Now, what terrifies me about that is that, what's the expression? We're eating our seed corn, right? We're destroying the pipeline. Where are our senior developers coming from 20 years from now if we're not hiring junior developers today? And that's another one of the things that worries me a lot more about AI than cheating. We are we're we have to think long term about the changes that this is going to have on society. You mentioned AI layoffs. There's a chart that's making the rounds on social media now showing the decline in jobs since ChatGPT came out, and a lot of that is I'm not sure how much of that is related to AI, but there's a stark correlation there. And we know that and it's not just computer companies, right? Law firms are hiring fewer paralegals, right? If the AI can write up a brief and summarize a contract, there's a lot of jobs that are being lost, and I think this is going to catch a lot of people off guard.
Is agentic AI the biggest threat to a lot of our graduates?
Could be, right? Well, because the thing is about agentic AI is that so I was just at the ASU Agentic AI conference, and the one good thing is that most of those agents are not really at the place where they can replace another human yet, but they can help as like an assistant for the human in the job, right? So I think one of the questions we're going to have is, does this how much does this reduce the number of people who have to be hired? How much does it make other people's jobs easier? If you look back at the history of automation in society, right, everybody's always trying to predict, oh, well, thanks to automation, we know you only have to work 20 hours a week, or what are humans going to do with all the spare time they have because automation saved them all this time on their job? And that's never really come true. Instead, we've just, asked a smaller number of people to do more work, thanks to the technology automation. And I suspect we'll have the same thing happening with AI. And agents are just sort of the next step in that. I don't know if you've played around with any of the agentic AI browsers. Um, I can point an agent at a website and say, here, figure out how to get movie tickets for me or whatever, and just let it go to town. It's not quite yet at the point where I feel like I'm willing to let it just do that without my watching it, though. So I'm not sure how much time I'm saving yet, but it will be soon. I think one of the maxims you hear a lot when you talk to people about this is that this is the worst it's ever going to be, right? It's just going to
Yeah.
keep getting better. Look at the AI video generation, for example. That's another area that I like to show our faculty when they're asking about this, right? Because I did this with a faculty member in our College of Business just the other day. I took a selfie of the two of us together, gave that to Google, and turned that into a video of us having a conversation that we didn't have. And you couldn't tell from watching the video that that wasn't actually the two of us talking, right?
Yeah.
And we are very, very close to a world. Well, in fact, I'd say we're already in a world where you can't trust anything you see, you can't trust anything you hear, because all of that could just be AI generated. And what does that mean to grow up in that world? How are we training or preparing our students of all ages for that world?
Do you see this as an opportunity, though, for us to perhaps develop new outlooks for job potential for students? Because we did see this during the industrial era,
Hmm.
and so it actually translated into new opportunities. So maybe thinking of AI in terms of upskilling and future forward kind of thinking in terms of job opportunities.
Absolutely. And in fact, at the recent APLU conference, that was being talked about a lot. This is basically another industrial revolution. And one of the things, so I'm at a large public university right here. And one of the nice things about the public and land grant universities, you look at the Merrill Act and the early 1800s, right? All of this was a way to bring education to a completely new audience and change the purpose of the university system to basically enable people to have a life that's going to be successful in a new world. And I think we have an opportunity here to do the exact same thing, to offer our students new experiences and new opportunities moving forward. I think that's going to be challenging because we're going to have to reassess everything that we're teaching and think about how do we teach our students to, well, like I said earlier, assess the quality of information sources. How do you determine what's real and what's fake? We've had this problem for quite a while. Most of the problems we're dealing with now are not brand new because of AI, but we've been able to ignore them for a while, and now we can't ignore them anymore. If you've ever talked to faculty who teach courses on information literacy, for example, or data literacy, they've been warning about this for 20 years, but it was always kind of hard work to create fake data. Now I can create an entire fake data set in a matter of seconds. So now it's become much more of a pressing problem. How do we determine what's real and what's not? But those are the new kinds of skills that our students are going to need, and all of that is, yes, indeed, going to lead to new jobs that the AI can't do.
Great. Well, we're at time, and so I'll be respectful of Dr. Marty's time. So thank you so much for your time. I think this was, I know everybody here has been paying attention on the edge of their seat the entire time. So thank you so much. This was super, super helpful, Dr. Marty. I
Well, you are
appreciate
very
it.
welcome. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's a real pleasure to get the chat with you all. I love talking about these things because I think it's a real opportunity for us in the universities to think about. I mean, the awesome responsibility we do have, as I said a minute ago, to prepare the next generation. And if we're not thinking about how we're going to use these tools and these technologies and how our students are going to use them, then in many ways we're doing them a disservice. So I'm glad we're having these conversations.
Yeah, thank you so much. And then next time you see Jonathan, tell him we said hi. I don't know if you
Will
know
do.
Jonathan. He went to school here and so used to work with us and everything. So he's a longtime friend of ours.
He spoke very highly of you all. I saw him just this morning.
Very good. All right. Well, thank you so much and you have a
Great.
great day.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
See you. Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.